My name is Davin Holen. I'm a coastal community resilience specialist for Alaska Sea Grant, and I'm research faculty with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And I provide data and decision support tools to communities across Alaska to adapt to climate change. So I work with them to build resilience, create adaptation plans. So my background is I'm an anthropologist, and I've worked in communities across the state from Southeast Alaska to the Arctic. And so over time, what I've found is that, as we did our research studying subsistence way of life and local and traditional knowledge, there's a great amount of change that's happening in these communities. They still rely on wild resources for a lot of their harvest. They harvest about 350 pounds average per person across the state per year in rural communities. So that's quite high. Lots of salmon, large game, marine mammals, berries, fish, other types of fish besides salmon. So, these type of economies are really important to people. And I've seen a change in the ability for communities to rapidly adapt to the changes happening around them so that they can still access those resources. Harvesting wild resources is important for the continuity of culture, for passing traditions on to the next generation. And those type of things are being disrupted. Here in Alaska, we're data poor, unlike the rest of the United States. So we try to provide data at a regional level. So, for example, I worked with some tribes in Southeast Alaska to provide data for the Upper Lynn Canal for the communities of Haines and Klukwan. So they could just see what the potential futures might look like in their region into the future. And that helps them plan for monitoring wild resources. It helps them plan for new homes they might need to build. As it gets warmer or they get smoke coming in from Yukon, like in the summer, where their water sources are going to have to come from as the snowpack starts to melt. In Western Alaska, we've looked at things like permafrost thaw, how storms like we're having right now are really impacting communities, inundating communities, and also taking the land away. So we work with them to help plan for that. I also have a website called Adapt Alaska, and it walks a community through the process of resilience planning. It kind of helps them. I provide on that website is links to resources, case studies.
What's then the main challenge in working with people and make them aware and help them to adapt to climate change?
Even in my lifetime growing up here, I've seen the climate change. The seasonal patterns are different. Today, we notice them more because the media allows for that transmission of knowledge. Social media allows for that transmission. So people are telling their stories more about how it's actually impacting them.
Okay.
And so, it's become more of a, I think, here in Alaska, we actually recognize that, people you wouldn't think are very conservative type of people, they recognize it because it's happening. Whether they agree what the cause is or not, that's to be determined.
Okay.
But they do recognize that there is an impact.
Okay.
Yeah. Alaska Peninsula called Port Hayden. And it's a really active community. They're a small community. They've had to move from Meshik, which is their traditional community, and they sit on pumice stone because it's volcanic there. And so, the coastal erosion has taken the beach away very quickly because of the soft soils there. And so the community had to move, and they needed to move all the houses off of there into the main part of the community. And they just went out and bought themselves a big, flatbed semi-truck and 2 front-end loaders, and they just picked all the houses up and moved them themselves. Like, they didn't expect somebody to come save them. Okay. They just looked for just enough funding and did it themselves. And eventually all of that land went away. They moved into Port Hayden, which is an old military base. And And so they had lots of space there that they, road infrastructure, airport infrastructure that they could use. And this community is very active, and it was a real pleasure to work there because, they have done things like started farms. They've brought in animals to raise. They're trying to build agriculture in their own space. They, are trying to adapt to what's around them. And they want to also build a place where their children can stay.
Of course.
Because that's what everybody wants. They want their children and grandchildren to stay in the village where they grew up. And that's the way I look at my work. It's not today. I'm not adapting for today. I'm adapting for 2 generations for now. And that's how I always talk to people. It's like, let's plan the community for your grandchildren.
And when you work with First Nation communities, for example, we used to say, many reports stated that we have to learn from indigenous people how to adapt to climate change, how to be resilient, because they have a specific and particular human-nature relation.
Correct.
So what do you think is the best teaching or they are giving to us here in Alaska?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
Yeah.
I think that in one aspect, thinking about the relationships that humans have with animals and the respect that they have to show them. So if you are a hunter-gatherer living in an environment like this, you need to use all the tools that you have. So you need your knowledge, you need your tools, innovative technology, but you also need that spiritual connection to the animal. And so people still maintain that spiritual connection. They don't outwardly talk about it very often, but they still maintain that connection. And so I think that, that can really teach us something about the relationship that people have with the environment around them. It's a lived landscape. We often see this as wild nature, but it's not. It's a lived landscape. And if we continue to ensure that we treat the fish and the animals like kin, like humans in another skin, that will help us, maintain the importance of why that's important for everyone.
How do you work to help people preventing or work against the impact of a oil spill? Because this is really difficult. It seems to me even more difficult than climate change, generally speaking.
So I think education is the key to that. So just a couple of blocks from here is an office building, and in 1991 I worked in a law firm there, reading the stories of the oil spill. And it was so I didn't work on the cleanup, but I worked on the aftermath. And I was very young at the time. I was maybe 20 years old and just out of high school. And I remember the oil spill. I remember that moment when I saw it on the news. And so, reading the stories there were stories of loss, stories of people, losing their way of life. And, talking to people about that loss of culture is the biggest thing. It really disrupted an entire generation of people. They lost the herring fishery. They could only fish salmon, which isn't enough money to make it through the year, so they had to get other jobs. There are communities there that have docks and harbors that are built for commercial fishing boats that have no commercial fishing boats. They're all gone. And so the way of life changed. The type of resources that people harvest have changed because of that.
Could you give me an example?
So we saw shellfish and marine mammals used to be very important to Alutiiq peoples in that region. And today, they've lost that connection to those resources. And so today it's mostly people salmon fish. They fish for halibut. They hunt moose and deer. Those kind of resources. So it's completely changed because the way of life of harvesting those other resources has been lost for a generation because they stopped doing it. And so if you don't have like a father or grandfather to teach you how to do that properly, you kind of lose that. So the type of jobs people have are different. People told me that they went from being a fishing economy to a disaster economy. And they haven't really transferred out of that disaster economy back into a fishing economy again. The herring fishery that was early allowed them to be full-time fisher people. So they could fish herring, and once that's done, they go fish salmon, and that would give them the income they needed for the year. Mm-hmm. But now the herring are gone. They're slowly recovering, which is a wonderful thing to see. But it's not enough to open a fishery, but they're such a charismatic fish. They're a beautiful fish. And
the name of the fish again?
Herring.
Herring,
yeah.
Okay.
They used to have them in the North Atlantic and other places, and they're gone now too. But they used to be able to harvest those and then go to the salmon fishery, and then that would be their income for the year. But now they have to have other jobs besides salmon fishing. So I have family that salmon fishes in that region, and so they have to do other things during the winter to get by.